Welcome back to Passion World Talk Radio Network, a wholly owned subsidiary of Global Media Network LLC. Educate, enlighten, entertain, and let's not forget mindfulness. Two notices. One, we have a new service for you, for everyone, anyone who doesn't like to do research, who doesn't have the slightest clue of how to get started or where to look or how to use it. Well, don't worry. Conscious Research Solutions is here to help you get and obtain what you need for anything you want, whether it's personal, business, holistic, food, diets, exercises, business, you name it, we can do it. Over 19 years of experience, research. Check us out. https:// passionateworldtalkradio.com. Click on services and you will see it. First 15-minute consultation is free. Introduce yourself, tell me what you want. There's a contract and a client form you need to fill out. Send it over to pwrnetworkllc@gmail.com with all your information. And then you don't have to worry about it. Oh, what do you receive in return? All the URLs. So you'll be provided a bibliography of where you can find everything in case you want to take a look. Also, keywords and key phrases to use, but most importantly, a summary of the information and material that you requested and asked for me to find for you. It is not a free service. This takes time. That's why you don't want to do it because you don't want or have all the necessary time. You're a busy person, whether personally or businessly. You are busy and you just don't have enough hours in the day. So let Conscious Research Solutions help you out. And do you need a daily tip like on Mondays, every Monday, on anything, everything? Because there are lots of things we don't have information for or we don't know. And it's really necessary sometime to keep track of some of these daily tips because you never know when you may need it. Life is full of challenges and also unexpected things happen when you least expect them. So be prepared and come and listen to Monday Daily Tips with Lillian. And you can find it over at youtube.com/ Passional World Radio or Spreaker.com/ and put in Monday Daily Tips with Lillian or go over to the website, passionalworldtalkradio.com. And now on with the program. Recently, you probably heard about some of the things that our current president is doing. And one of the things he's doing is he's not listening to any of the courts or their judges. And the ones who do go against him, well, they get impeached or imprisoned. Not in the United States. Oh, that's too easy. No, he'll put them in the South American prisons. And we all know about that from what we watch on TV now, don't we? Especially by the National Geographic, when airport searches are conducted to make sure there's nothing illegal being brought into any country that is against their laws. Those are the kind of countries that our current president is sending what he considers political people or normal people who contradict him. Our current president does not like to be told no, ever. He doesn't like people to criticize him. He wants to believe in his fantasy world, or what I call Never Never Land, where he can exact what he wants and he's above everybody. I wonder if that places him above God. I bet that's his next act, that he'll make himself the supreme God, too. I mean, Henry VIII did it. Nobody stopped him, did they? Pope never said a word. Nope. So we shall see. However, on today's program, lest we forget, we're going to talk about the relationship between the president and the Supreme Court. And you probably want to know some of these facts and figures and information so you'll have an idea exactly what's happening within your country. After all, according to the current administration, more than half the country voted for him to put into office, and they should learn what they voted him in for. So, some of the questions you may have is how effective have recent presidents achieved their aims? Interpretations and debates of the U.S. Supreme Court and civil rights, Supreme Court appointment process, checks and balances. So, what do you need to know? The Supreme Court was put in and established by our forefathers to have the final word on everything. And whatever their decisions were, good, bad, or indifferent, the law of the land applied. So, your question is, well, how can the president be influential over the Supreme Court? And you should know that presidents can be limited by the Supreme Court, which can and does uphold constitutional rules against them. And presidents typically lose Supreme Court cases in every year of their presidency. There are a lot of constitutional regulations on presidential power. And they're so implicit that you really can't miss them. For example, the maximum two-term rule or the ratifications of justices by the Senate. The Supreme Court can use its considerable power of judicial review to overturn either the actions of the president or the president's favored policies. The only formal power that the U.S. president has lies with nominations at a time of vacancy. This gives the president influence over the ideological balance of the court. The nomination of Merrick Garland by President Obama in 2016 may have had a huge impact on the rulings of the court. Before this, the court had a 5-4 conservative majority, but with the death of one of those five, a strong conservative, Antonin Scalia, Obama had the opportunity to tip the balance in favor of the liberals. Another major tipping in the overall ideological balance of the court occurred in 1991 with the appointment of the conservative Justice Clarence Thomas to replace the devoutly liberal Thurgood Marshall. It has been the case that the extent to which this gives power to an additional president can be limited. However, most presidential appointments make little or no difference to the overall ideological balance of the court. This is due because justices choose when to retire and typically do so when they have ideologically aligned with the current president. However, conservatives have suggested this view ignores the long-standing liberal dominance of the Supreme Court. To this end, the Republican presidents have sought to build a conservative majority on the court. And until our current president, they had some but limited success. However, our current president has a major influence on the court, making 3 appointments in a single term. The death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a liberal justice, allowed him to replace her with a significantly more conservative justice, Amy Coney Barrett. In October 2020, Justice Coney Barrett, the current president's third appointment, was perhaps the most significant, allowing him to secure a clear conservative majority on the court. And this resulted in some rulings which are very conservative. While presidents can change the composition, they have virtually no influence over any of the 9 justices who make a decision, including the ones they have appointed. Justices have life tenure, so the president can make no threat of removal against them. Also, most presidents only make 1 or 2 appointments with limited overall impact during their presidency. The role of the president is to defend the law and the Constitution, which means executing Supreme Court decisions. Presidents sometimes give a hostile response to the court for a Citizens United ruling, while many of them sat in the audience of his 2010 State of the Union address. There have been some occasions when presidents have been challenged the legitimacy of a court ruling and attempted to undermine it. Our current president had a clash with the judiciary in 2017, attacking the judge who halted his immigration ban. Referring to District Judge Robert as so-called judge, he instructed the U.S. public to blame the judge if anything went wrong. Even senior Republicans such as Mitch McConnell, were critical of that person's approach. And the numbers that we have tell a clear story. There are a total of 816 active federal judges comprising the Supreme Court, the 13 appellate courts, and 91 district courts. In just one term, the current president was able to appoint 28% of those judges due to past and continuing vacancies. Most importantly, he appointed 33% of America's 9 Supreme Court justices and 30% of the appellate judges. Talk about stacking your courts, huh? The vast majority of his appointments were white males. That's because women are supposed to be like children. I'm not going to tell you that men are like babies and they throw fits if they don't get what they want. I bet men won't like that analogy, but I'm getting tired of being called a child, considering we take care of their children and raise their children. Now, who is the fool? Anyway, not one of his 54 appellate judges were Black. But what really stood out is the age of his appointees. The average age of the appellate judges was 47, 5 years younger than those elected by Barack Obama. 6 of them were in their 30s and 20 were under 45. By contrast, of the 55 appellate judges picked by Obama, in 8 years, not 4, none were in their 30s and only 6 were younger than 45. And there's a reason why he put all those young men into office. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Keep that in mind, folks. His judicial appointments will shape American jurisprudence for decades to come. The Federal Judicial Center has found that this age disparity means that his judges will serve 270 more years than Obama's judges, and they will decide thousands more cases. Moreover, the average tenure for a Supreme Court judge has increased from 15 years in the early 1970s to 27 years in more recent years, due in large part to the younger age of the justices at the date of their appointment. His legacy of judicial appointments is most apparent in the recent behavior of the Supreme Court. A new term has been coined, the shadow docket, which refers to the sudden uptick in emergency requests filed by the government. In the 16 years preceding his presidency, only 8 such requests were filed, and of those, only 4 were granted. By contrast, during his first 4-year term, 41 such applications were made, of which 24 were granted. A 70% success rate that supported his policies. These cases are heard without full briefing, without oral argument, and often result in a single sentence order as opposed to a full reasoned opinion. One such decision overturned by a 5-4 order, a Wisconsin trial court order allowing an extension for the receipt of absentee ballots. This last-minute Supreme Court decision issued the day before the election caused chaos and confusion. Another example of how the new Safely pro-president court supported his policies and involved his administration's rule prohibiting migrants from seeking asylum in the United States before seeking it in the countries to which they had traveled. The lower courts suspended enforcement of this unprecedented rule, but the Supreme Court allowed the ban to take effect immediately, even as the case proceeded through the lower courts. Another particularly disturbing example involved 4 death penalty cases where a lower court halted 4 executions because the use of pentobarbital to kill the prisoners would constitute cruel and unusual punishment. In a 5-4 ruling issued after 2 a.m., the stay was overturned and at least one of the executions carried out, the first federal prisoner to be executed in 17 years. More recently, in yet another emergency appeal, the Supreme Court, by a 5-4 margin, refused to block the newly enacted Texas law banning abortion after 6 weeks of pregnancy, allowing that rule to be enforced for the foreseeable future. The emergency request was brought by abortion providers after the very conservative Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, to which he had appointed 6 judges, stopped the trial court from holding a hearing as to whether the new law could take immediate effect. A month later, a trial judge blocked the law from taking effect, and the Fifth Circuit promptly reversed it. The Department of Justice is now appealing that decision to the Supreme Court. Texas abortion law takes effect, no exceptions for rape or incest. That's very fine and dandy, but who's going to bring up these children? Who's going to pay? You don't know. The Supreme Court declined to block a Texas law banning most abortions in a 5-4 decision. Chief Justice John Roberts and the court's 3 liberal judges, Stephen Breyer, Sonia Sotomayor, and Elena Kagan, dissented in the late Wednesday move. The narrowly decided opinion, issued in a single paragraph, dealt a major blow to abortion access in Texas. It also underscored the significance of the court's ideological shift to right under the current president. In 2022, Biden publicly criticized the Supreme Court ruling in Dobbs versus Jackson, calling it a tragic error. This decision overturned the Constitution protection for abortion established in Roe versus Wade in 1973. Biden urged voters to elect more Democrats to Congress in the midterm elections of 2022 to strengthen abortion rights. He stated that Congress could create a law guaranteeing the right to abortion, which all states would have to follow. Additionally, he directed the Department of Health and Human Services to ensure access to reproductive health clinics and protect the privacy of users. This situation highlights the ideological conflict within the court and suggests that the president may influence future decisions by the justices who might consider his criticism. The case, Biden versus Texas, forced the Biden administration to abandon his more liberal approach of allowing asylum seekers across the border to process their claims and return to more restrictive policies. Presidents can propose a change to the Constitution to reverse a Supreme Court decision. Some have even suggested expanding the court by adding more justices. The Constitution does not set a specific number of justices, so a president could quickly increase the total by 2 or 3 to gain a majority. However, the idea of expanding the court has never been carried out. Franklin Roosevelt was the last president to seriously consider this in 1937. Overall, presidents cannot control the Supreme Court. They cannot decide cases against the court's wishes. This is due to their limited power over it. The court operates independently, which protects justices from outside influences, including from the president. The president's main role related to the court is to make nominations, but that does not give them control. However, this does not imply that the Supreme Court holds more power than the president. Presidents greatly shape U.S. policy in ways the Supreme Court does not. It is hard to claim that the president has any dominance over the court. But then that's an oxymoron, isn't that? Because that exactly because of how the current president selected his justices, he has supported and will continue to support the conservative outlook, which means, ladies, you're going to lose the right to vote and you're going to lose your jobs because conservatives do not believe that women should be anywhere at home with their legs spread out and giving birth. Something for you ladies to think about. And for us who can no longer bear true children, read the book The Handmaid's Tale. It'll tell you all about what they do to people like us. Something similar to the suggestion from the current president that all old people should volunteer to die. I hope he includes himself because he's an old person. And especially if he runs another term, he'll be in his 90s, late 90s, by the time he's finished. And let's face it, folks, somebody in their 90s can't help somebody who is 21 years old and legally allowed to fight in the army. Of course, that may be taken away from you as well, since he's getting rid of everybody else, the blacks, the transgender, and women. It should be an all-male army because males are superior. But I got bad news for them. They won't be able to stand up against all the robots, especially those robot dogs from China. But lest you forget, current 21st century isn't the first people to think of using robots. Hitler was looking into that as well. Food for thought. Thank you very much for listening to Lest We Forget Historical with your host, Lillian Cauldwell. Don't forget, Conscious Research Solutions. Go over to the website, passionworldtalkradio.com/services. Check it out. Schedule an appointment with me through calendly.com/passionworldradio. Other things to consider: the obstacle course of podcasting. I know everyone and their mother is out there telling you, showing you how to do a podcast, but I take it a step further. I actually have you practice what I just taught you, and you have the opportunity to make and create 3 podcast episodes and then present them on pwtrn for 3 consecutive weeks. Check us out, education.passionworldtalkradio.com/masterclass. And while you're at it, check out http://AI-with-Lillian.com. See what the world is talking about. Don't get left behind. Pandora's box has been opened, and artificial intelligence is here to stay, whether you like it or not. In fact, kids in colleges and universities everywhere are encouraged to go get a lot of their research information from AI. So, parents, be aware that your kids will learn this valuable tool, and whether you like it or not, it's something that you will have to learn how to do. Don't be left out in the cold. It is a no-brainer. You can listen to this podcast either through youtube.com/passionworldradio_PWTR or go over to our blog, passionworldtalkradio.com/blog. Also on Spreaker.com/PW Thank you very much for listening. Have a great weekend. And remember, keep alert. Try to get the best possible, quote, truthful, unquote, news that you can. A dictator takes hold of the media first. That's why the current administration refuses to let certain NPR, Reuters, and other good media outlets in to listen to their cabinet meetings or be allowed to come into the White House and ask questions of the current administration. They want people who will come in and lick their hands like obedient dogs. Palva showed us a long time ago, conditioning is a wonderful thing. And if you do something long enough, the person you're aiming your conditioning at will usually be propagandized. and they'll start parroting everything their boss says. And if that's what you're looking for in the United States, well, welcome to reality. Thank you very much for listening. Have a good weekend.